My flight was canceled. I drove home. My daughter was gone. My family said she was with Grandma. I didn't call. I went straight there. The house was dark. The garage light was on. I opened the door. My daughter stood frozen, terrified and crying. Grandma said, "Don't tell you." It was 2 a.m. She'd been there for hours. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now let's dive into today's story. The Phoenix airport smelled like burnt coffee and recycled air. Renee Calder stood beneath the departure board, watching letters flip and rearrange themselves into a single word that made her stomach tighten. Cancelled. Around her, travelers groaned and swore. A man in a business suit started shouting at the gate agent, his face red under the fluorescent lights. A woman with 2 toddlers sank onto her suitcase and put her head in her hands. The agent kept repeating the same phrase in a voice stripped of all emotion. Weather conditions. We apologize for the inconvenience. Renee didn't join the crowd pressing toward the counter. She pulled out her phone and opened the car rental app. The training seminar had run 3 days longer than planned. 3 days of conference rooms with scratchy carpet and presentations about workplace synergy. 3 days of forcing smiles during networking lunches. 3 days away from Mavis. Her daughter was 7 years old. Small for her age, always had been. Dark hair that fell straight to her shoulders. Eyes that watched everything, took in more than most adults noticed. Serious, her kindergarten teacher had written on a report card. Observant, sometimes anxious. Mavis had been staying with Renee's brother, Owen, and his wife, Paige. Not ideal, but family was family, and Renee had needed someone she could trust. Trust. The word sat bitter in her mouth now. She walked past the shouting man, past the crying toddlers, out into the dry Arizona night. The rental car was a gray sedan with cloth seats that smelled like vanilla air freshener. She threw her bag in the back, adjusted the mirrors, and pulled up the navigation app. Phoenix to Millbrook, Oregon. 14 hours and 23 minutes. Renee pressed start and drove. The highway stretched dark and endless. Renee kept the radio off. She didn't want music or talk radio or anything that would crowd her thoughts. Just the hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional sweep of headlights passing in the opposite direction. She'd called Mavis every night during the trip. Short conversations because Paige always hovered nearby, interjecting with cheerful comments about what they'd done that day. The zoo, the park, ice cream. Mavis had sounded fine. Quiet, but that was normal. She wasn't a loud child, didn't fill silence with chatter the way other kids did. Did you have fun at the park? Renee had asked on Tuesday night. Yeah. A pause. Aunt Paige got me a balloon. That's nice, sweetheart. Another pause. When are you coming home? Friday. 2 more days. Okay. Mavis's voice had been small, but steady. I miss you. I miss you too, baby. So much. Paige had taken the phone then, launching into a story about Mavis making friends with a dog at the park, and Renee had listened and made the appropriate sounds until she could say goodnight. Now it was Friday night, technically Saturday morning, and the flight that should have landed her in Portland at 10 p.m. had been canceled after midnight. She could have waited, found a hotel, caught a morning flight, but something pulled at her, an instinct she couldn't name. So she drove. Nevada passed in darkness. Rest stops with flickering lights and vending machines. Gas stations where tired clerks barely looked up from their phones. The desert gave way to mountains, then to the high plateau country of eastern Oregon. Renee stopped once for gas and a cup of coffee so bad she dumped it after 3 sips. Her eyes burned. Her shoulders ached. But she kept driving. She didn't call ahead. Didn't text. Owen would have told her to wait, to be reasonable, to not drive 14 hours straight. He always had opinions about what she should do. The sky began to lighten as she crossed into the western part of the state. Pine trees replaced sagebrush. The air through the cracked window smelled like rain and earth instead of dust. Renee's phone said 1:17 a.m. when she took the exit for Millbrook. The town was silent. No cars on Main Street. No lights except the gas station at the edge of town and the single blinking yellow traffic light at the intersection. Millbrook had 4,000 people on a good day. Most of them were asleep now. Renee drove past the elementary school where Mavis would start second grade in the fall, past the library, past the grocery store with its empty parking lot. Her house sat on Elm Street, a narrow two-bedroom with white siding and a front porch she'd been meaning to repaint for 2 years. The porch light was off. Renee frowned. She always left it on when she traveled. She parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, hands still, gripping the wheel. Her body felt heavy, her thoughts sluggish from too many hours on the road. But she was home. The key turned smoothly in the lock. The door opened into darkness. Mavis. Renee flipped on the light. The living room looked exactly as she'd left it. Couch with the worn armrest. Coffee table with a stack of library books. Mavis's crayon drawing of a cat taped to the wall. But something felt wrong. Renee walked down the hallway, turned on more lights. Mavis's bedroom door stood open. The bed was made. The stuffed rabbit Mavis slept with every night sat propped against the pillow. No small sneakers by the front door. No backpack. No tablet plugged in and charging on the kitchen counter. Renee pulled out her phone and called Paige. 3 rings. 4. Then a groggy voice. Hello. Where's Mavis? Renee kept her voice level. Silence. Then Paige cleared her throat. Renee? What time is it? 1:30. Where is my daughter? Oh. Fabric rustled. Paige sitting up in bed. She's with your mom. Mom wanted her for an overnight. I thought you knew. The air in the kitchen felt too thin. You didn't ask me. Well, it was kind of last minute. Mom called yesterday afternoon and said she missed her granddaughter. I didn't think it would be a big deal. Your flight wasn't supposed to land until tonight anyway. The flight got canceled. Oh. Paige's voice carried that familiar note of patient exasperation. The one that said Renee was being difficult again. Renee, she's fine. She's with her grandmother. Don't make this into something dramatic. You gave my daughter to someone without asking me. Your mother, Renee. I gave her to your mother. Jesus. A sigh. Look, I'm sorry I didn't text you, but it's not like she's with strangers. She's family. Renee ended the call. For a moment she stood in her kitchen, phone in hand, breathing carefully through her nose. The refrigerator hummed. The clock above the stove ticked. Outside, something small, a raccoon, maybe, knocked over a trash can. Then she grabbed her keys and walked back out to the car. Her mother's house sat 20 minutes outside town on a dirt road that turned to mud when it rained. A small ranch-style place with peeling paint and a chain-link fence that enclosed nothing but weeds and an old wheelbarrow. Renee had grown up here, had learned to be quiet here, to not take up space, to anticipate when silence meant approval and when it meant danger. She hadn't been back in 8 months. The porch light was off. Most of the windows were dark, but light spilled from beneath the garage door, bright against the gravel driveway. Renee parked and got out. The night air smelled like pine and something else, livestock from the property down the road. An owl called from somewhere in the trees. She walked past the front door, past the living room window with its curtains drawn, straight to the side entrance of the garage. The door opened inward. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered, casting harsh shadows across the concrete floor. Garden tools hung on one wall. Cardboard boxes were stacked against another. In the center, near an old workbench covered in paint cans, stood Mavis. She wore the same clothes she'd had on in the photo Paige had texted 3 days ago. purple leggings and a pink shirt with a unicorn. Her sneakers were still tied. Her arms were wrapped tight around her middle like she was trying to hold something in. Her face was splotchy and red. Tear tracks cut through the dust on her cheeks. "Mom," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "Grandma said don't tell you." Renee's vision went sharp. Every detail carved itself into her memory. The way Mavis's shoulders hunched forward, the tremble in her hands, the way she stood perfectly still, like movement might shatter something. Renee crossed the garage in 4 strides and knelt down. She didn't grab, didn't pull, just held her hands out, palms up. Mavis collapsed into her. The hug was fierce and desperate. Mavis's fingers dug into Renee's shirt. Her breath came in short, hiccuping gasps. "I've got you," Renee said quietly. "You're okay. I've got you." She held her daughter and looked around the garage. Really looked. A camping chair sat folded in the corner. A blanket, thin, meant for summer picnics, lay crumpled on the floor. A plastic cup half empty. "How long have you been here, baby?" Mavis pressed her face into Renee's shoulder. "I got here before it was dark." Renee glanced at her phone. 1:47 a.m. Sunset had been around 7:30. 6 hours. Her 7-year-old daughter had been locked in this garage for 6 hours. "Where's Grandma?" Inside. Mavis's voice was muffled against Renee's shirt. She said she was tired. She said I should stay here because I was being difficult. Renee closed her eyes, breathed in the smell of her daughter's shampoo, strawberry, from the bottle they kept in the shower, felt the small body trembling against hers. "Did she hurt you?" No. Mavis pulled back enough to look at her mother. Her eyes were huge and wet. She got mad. "Because I said I wanted to go home." She said, "You spoil me, and I don't know how good I have it." Something cold and sharp formed in Renee's chest. It felt like glass, like ice, like something that would cut on its way out. "Come on, sweetheart." She stood, lifting Mavis with her. "We're leaving." "But Grandma." "We're leaving." Renee walked to the door that connected the garage to the house. She tried the handle. Locked. She shifted Mavis to her hip and walked back outside. Carried her daughter through the night air to the car. Opened the passenger door and set her in the seat. Then grabbed a blanket from the back, the emergency one she kept in case of breakdowns, and wrapped it around Mavis's shoulders. "Buckle up, baby." Mavis's hands shook as she pulled the seatbelt across her chest. Renee reached over and clicked it into place, then got behind the wheel. She didn't knock on her mother's door, didn't call, didn't announce herself. She just drove away, gravel crunching under the tires, and watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. Mavis fell asleep before they reached town, her head lolled against the window, her breathing evening out into the soft rhythm of exhaustion. Renee drove, carefully avoiding potholes, taking turns gently. At home, she carried Mavis inside and laid her in bed without changing her clothes, tucked the blanket around her, placed the stuffed rabbit in her arms. Mavis stirred. "Mom." "I'm right here." "Are you mad?" The question landed like a punch. "At you?" "Never. Not even a little bit." "Grandma said." Grandma was wrong. Renee smoothed her daughter's hair back from her forehead. "Whatever she said, whatever she did, none of it was your fault. Do you understand?" Mavis nodded. Her eyes were already closing again. Renee sat on the edge of the bed until Mavis's breathing deepened and her grip on the rabbit loosened. Then she walked back to the living room and stood at the window, looking out at the street. The town was still sleeping. Stars hung bright in the clear sky. Everything looked normal, peaceful, but something had broken tonight. Something Renee hadn't even realized was holding together until it shattered. She pulled out her phone and opened her messages. Her thumb hovered over her brother's name. Then she set the phone down and went to make coffee instead. Morning would come soon enough. The phone started ringing at 9:47 a.m. Renee was in the kitchen making pancakes. Mavis sat at the table in fresh clothes, hair brushed, working on a coloring book. The normalcy felt deliberate, necessary. The phone buzzed against the counter. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. Renee flipped another pancake and let it ring. It stopped. Started again 30 seconds later. "Who is it?" Mavis asked without looking up from her coloring. "Nobody important." Renee slid 2 pancakes onto a plate and brought them to the table. "Eat up." The phone rang 3 more times during breakfast. Renee ignored it each time. She poured orange juice, cut Mavis's pancakes into smaller pieces, asked about the drawing Mavis was working on, a garden with butterflies. Finally, a text appeared. "We need to talk. Call me." Renee deleted it. 10 minutes later, Owen called. She almost ignored him too. But Owen could be persistent when he wanted to be, and eventually this conversation would have to happen. Better to control when and how. She answered on the 4th ring. "What?" "Jesus, Renee. Mom's been calling you all morning." "I know. Can you please just talk to her? She's upset." Renee looked at Mavis, who was arranging her crayons in rainbow order, not eating. "I'm busy. Look, I don't know what happened last night, but Mom said you showed up and took Mavis without even saying anything. You didn't knock. You just left." "That's right." "That's—" Owen made a frustrated sound. "Can you at least tell me what's going on? Where were you last night? Where was Paige?" "What? We were home." "What does that have to do with anything?" "So you knew Mavis was at Mom's?" A pause. "Paige mentioned it, yeah." "Did she mention Mom locked Mavis in the garage?" Silence. Renee kept her voice calm, even. 6 hours, Owen. Maybe more. From before sunset until after midnight. Locked in the garage with a camping chair and a blanket. That's... Owen's voice sounded strained. "That can't be right. I found her there at 2 in the morning. The door to the house was locked. Mavis was still wearing her shoes. Mom wouldn't." "She did." More silence. Then, "Did you ask Mom about it?" "No." "Don't you think you should hear her side before you?" "No." Renee set down her coffee mug with enough force that Mavis glanced up. She softened her voice. "I don't need to hear her side. I was there. I saw my daughter's face." "Renee, come on. You're always—" He stopped himself. "Always what?" "Nothing. Look, can we just talk about this reasonably? I'm sure there's an explanation. I'm sure there is. Tell Mom she can keep it." Renee ended the call and turned her phone off completely. Mavis was watching her now, crayon motionless in her hand. "Is Uncle Owen mad?" "Uncle Owen," Renee said carefully, "is confused. But that's not your problem, okay? Finish your breakfast." By noon, Owen had texted from his wife's phone. "Paige wants to talk." "Please." Renee turned her phone back on long enough to block the number, then turned it off again. At 2 in the afternoon, someone knocked on the door. Renee looked through the window. Paige stood on the porch, arms crossed, expression tight. "Stay in your room for a minute, sweetheart," Renee told Mavis. Mavis gathered her coloring supplies without argument and disappeared down the hallway. Renee waited until she heard the bedroom door close before opening the front door. She didn't step aside to let Paige in. "Seriously." Paige said, "You're blocking my number now." "Yes." "This is ridiculous, Renee. Your mom is beside herself. Owen's been trying to reach you all day." "Good." Paige's mouth tightened. "Look, I get that you're upset, but shutting everyone out isn't going to solve anything. We're family. Family doesn't lock children in garages. Your mom said Mavis was being difficult and needed some space to calm down. She said you've always been overprotective and Mavis is starting to act out because of it." The cold, sharp feeling in Renee's chest expanded. Mavis was locked in a garage for 6 hours. Alone. In the dark. That's not giving her space. That's neglect at best. Abuse at worst. Oh my God. Paige rolled her eyes. Abuse? Really? She was in a garage, not a dungeon. Your mom probably just wanted her to think about her behavior. She's 7. Exactly. 7. Old enough to learn consequences. For what? Renee's voice stayed level, but something in it made Paige step back. What did my daughter do that deserved being locked away for half the night? Paige faltered. I don't know exactly. Your mom said she was being mouthy. Mouthy? Yeah. Talking back. Being difficult. She's 7 years old and she wanted to go home. Paige threw her hands up. See? This is exactly what your mom was talking about. You can't even hear criticism without getting defensive. Nobody's saying you're a bad mother, Renee. But maybe, just maybe, you could stand to loosen up a little. Let Mavis be a kid. Let other people help without micromanaging everything. Help. The word tasted like poison. You call that help? I call it family trying to support you. But you're so convinced everyone's out to get you that you can't see when people are actually trying to do you a favor. Renee looked at Paige, really looked at her, took in the designer jeans, the highlighted hair, the slight tan from their recent vacation. Paige had always been effortlessly pretty, always knew the right thing to say at parties, always made Owen laugh, and she'd handed Mavis over without a second thought. Get off my porch, Renee said quietly. What? Get off my porch. Leave. You're being insane. Now. Something in Renee's expression must have finally registered. Paige's face flushed. Fine, but don't come crying to us when you need help again. She turned and stalked back to her car, a white SUV with vanity plates that said Paigey. The engine roared to life. The tires squealed as she backed out of the driveway. Renee closed the door, locked it. Then she walked to Mavis's room and knocked gently. You can come out now, baby. Mavis opened the door. Was that Aunt Paige? Yes. Is she mad? Probably. Mavis thought about that. Are you mad? No. Renee knelt down to her daughter's eye level. I'm not mad at you. And I'm not mad that I'm protecting you. Don't ever think that. Okay. Mavis nodded slowly. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Renee's neck. They stayed like that for a long time. That night, after Mavis was asleep, Renee sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. She wrote down everything she could remember from the night before. Times, locations, the state of the garage, the locked door. Mavis's exact words. Grandma said don't tell you. She wrote down the phone calls. Owen's deflection. Paige's dismissal. Her mother's absence from every conversation. Then she started writing down other things. Older things. The time Owen had volunteered to watch 6-year-old Mavis and left her alone to run to the store, only telling Renee afterward when Mavis mentioned it. The time her mother had criticized Renee's parenting in front of Mavis, saying she was raising her to be soft. The time Paige had given Mavis candy after Renee explicitly said no, then laughed when Renee got upset, saying, "That's what aunts are for." Small things. Individually, they seemed minor, petty even. Together, they formed a pattern. Her family thought she was too careful, too controlling, too worried, and they'd decided without her input, without her consent, to prove she was wrong. They'd used her daughter to teach her a lesson. Renee closed the notebook and sat in the quiet kitchen, listening to the refrigerator hum and the house settle. She felt cold, clear, like something inside her had crystallized into perfect certainty. This would not happen again. The next morning, her mother finally called from Owen's phone. Renee answered. "Hello. It's Mom." The voice was sharp, aggrieved. "I know you've been avoiding me." "Yes." "Well, I think we need to talk about what happened." "No, we don't." Excuse me. Renee poured herself coffee and sat down. I don't need to hear your explanation. I know what happened. You think you know, but if you just listen. You locked my daughter in the garage for 6 hours because you thought I was too protective, because you wanted to show me that my way of parenting was wrong. Silence. Then she was safe. She was terrified. She was dramatic, just like you always were, always making everything into a crisis. The cold feeling spread. Why was the door to the house locked? What? The door between the garage and the house. Why was it locked? Her mother's voice shifted, became defensive. I didn't want her wandering around while I was trying to sleep. She needed to learn that there are consequences for being difficult. She's 7 years old. Old enough to know better. Better than what? Wanting to go home to her mother. Better than acting like a spoiled brat. The words came out sharp and fast. You baby her, Renee. You always have. She doesn't know how to be independent because you won't let her breathe without checking on her. I was trying to show you. Show me what? Renee's voice cut through the tirade. That you're willing to hurt my child to prove a point? I didn't hurt her. For God's sake, it was just a garage. She had a chair. She had a blanket. She was perfectly safe. She was locked in a concrete room. Alone. In the dark. She had light. The light was on. And when you turned it off, when you went to bed. Silence again. You didn't even check on her, Renee said. You locked the door and went to sleep. She would have been fine until morning. She would have learned. Learned what? That her family doesn't keep her safe? That asking to go home is bad behavior? What lesson exactly were you trying to teach my daughter? You're twisting everything. I'm stating facts. Her mother's voice rose. The problem is you. You've always been like this. Always accusing people. Always thinking the worst. Even when your father, she stopped. When my father what? Nothing. Say it. Fine. When your father left, you blamed me. You were difficult then too. Always questioning, always arguing. You made everything harder than it had to be. Renee's hand tightened on the phone. I was 12. And old enough to show some respect. Something settled deep in Renee's chest. Something heavy and final. We're done, she said. What? We're done. You, Owen, Paige, all of you. We're done. You can't be serious. You will not see Mavis again. You will not call. You will not show up unannounced. If I see you near my house or her school, I will call the police. You're being ridiculous. No, Renee said. I'm being clear. Goodbye, Mom. She ended the call. Her hand was steady. Her breathing was calm. She felt no tears, no rage, just certainty. Some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. Owen tried calling 3 times that afternoon. Renee didn't answer. Instead, she texted from her car while Mavis was at a friend's house for a play date. Do not contact me again. Do not come to my house. Do not try to see Mavis. If you do, I will pursue legal action. The response came quickly. You're tearing this family apart. Renee almost laughed. Instead, she typed, No, you already did. She blocked his number. Then she blocked Paige's number. Then her mother's number. All 3 of the numbers her mother used to call from. Home, cell, and work. Then she went through Mavis's school paperwork and emergency contact forms. Removed Owen's name. Removed her mother's name. Updated everything to show only herself and 2 trusted friends as approved for pickup. She called the school office and confirmed the changes. Spoke to the principal. Mentioned, carefully and factually, that certain family members were no longer allowed contact with her daughter due to safety concerns. The principal listened, took notes, didn't argue. Renee drove home, feeling lighter than she had in days. 2 weeks later, Paige sent a long message. It appeared as a text preview notification because Renee hadn't blocked quite all of Paige's accounts. I've been thinking a lot about family and forgiveness. I know we all made mistakes, but I truly believe. Renee deleted it without reading the rest. Forgiveness was for people who deserved it, for people who acknowledged harm and worked to repair it. Her family had done neither. They defended themselves, made excuses, blamed her, and they'd been willing to use her daughter, her serious, careful, sweet daughter, as a prop in their judgment of her parenting. That wasn't love. It wasn't family. It was something else entirely. The summer turned to fall. Leaves changed color. The air smelled like wood smoke and rain. Mavis started second grade. She brought home drawings and spelling tests and stories about a girl named Ruby who sat next to her and shared crayons. She stopped asking about Grandma, stopped mentioning Uncle Owen and Aunt Paige. The nightmares lasted 3 weeks. Renee would wake to small footsteps in the hallway, find Mavis standing in her doorway, silent and trembling. Sometimes she'd had dreams about being locked in dark places, sometimes about being left behind. Renee never sent her back to her own bed. She'd lift the covers and Mavis would climb in, pressing close, and Renee would hold her until morning. By October, the nightmares stopped. By November, Mavis was sleeping through the night again. Renee kept working, kept cooking dinner, kept checking homework and signing permission slips and volunteering for the school book fair. Everything looked normal from the outside, but she'd started looking at smaller houses, closer to downtown, places with better locks, places where the neighbors were nearer, places that felt less isolated. She found one in December, a 2-bedroom cottage, 3 blocks from the library, hardwood floors, a backyard with apple trees, windows that faced the street, so she could always see who was coming. She signed the lease the same day. They moved the week before Christmas. Mavis helped pack her room, carefully wrapping her art supplies and arranging her stuffed animals in a box. She seemed excited rather than anxious about the change. "Will my new room have a window?" she asked. 2 windows, Renee said. One that faces the apple trees. "Can we put the bird feeder outside it?" Absolutely. They worked in comfortable silence, Mavis humming something she'd learned in music class. Then Mavis stopped and looked at Renee. "Are you happy, Mom?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean, baby?" "You seem, I don't know." Mavis tilted her head, considering. "Different. Like you're not worried anymore." Renee sat down on the edge of the bed. "Come here." Mavis climbed up beside her. "I'm not worried," Renee said slowly, "because I know what matters and what doesn't. Sometimes people show you who they are, and you have to believe them, even if they're family. Like Grandma. Like Grandma. Mavis thought about that. "Is it okay that I'm not sad?" "More than okay. I thought I would be, but I'm not." "You don't have to be sad about losing people who didn't keep you safe," Renee said. "That's actually very smart." Mavis leaned against her. "I like our new house." "Me too, sweetheart." On Christmas Eve, someone knocked on the door. Renee looked through the window and saw her mother standing on the porch. She wore a dark coat and held a wrapped present. Her face looked older than Renee remembered. Thinner. Renee didn't open the door. She stood on the other side, arms crossed. Her mother saw her through the glass. Knocked again. "Renee, please. It's Christmas." Renee didn't move. "I just want to talk. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Still nothing. Her mother's expression shifted from pleading to frustrated. "You're being childish. I'm your mother." Renee reached up and turned the deadbolt, loudly, so her mother could hear. "Fine." The word came out bitter. "Fine. But you're tearing this family apart. You know that, right? Owen won't even talk to me anymore. Paige cries every time I bring it up. And for what? Because I tried to help." Renee stepped closer to the door, but didn't open it. When she spoke, her voice was quiet enough that her mother had to lean in to hear. No, because you hurt my daughter to prove a point, and you never said you were sorry. Her mother stopped. It wasn't like that. Yes, it was. She was fine. No, she wasn't. They stood separated by glass and a locked door. Her mother's face looked red now, whether from cold or anger Renee couldn't tell. You've always been like this, her mother said. Always holding grudges. Always punishing people. You got that from your father. I got self-respect from somewhere, Renee said. Maybe it was him. Her mother's face crumpled. For a moment, she looked small, confused. Then the anger snapped back. You'll regret this, she said. When you need family, when you need help, you'll regret burning these bridges. No, Renee said calmly. I won't. Her mother stood there a moment longer. Then she set the wrapped present on the porch and walked away. Renee watched her get in her car, the same old sedan, rust spots on the wheel wells, and drive off. Then she picked up the present without opening it and put it directly in the trash. Mavis appeared in the hallway. Who was it? Nobody important. Oh. Mavis went back to arranging ornaments on the small tree they'd bought together. Can we make hot chocolate? Absolutely. They spent Christmas Eve drinking cocoa and watching old movies. Mavis fell asleep on the couch, head in Renee's lap, the lights from the tree blinking soft colors across her face. Renee stroked her daughter's hair and felt nothing but relief. January came cold and clear. Mavis's 8th birthday passed quietly, a small party with 3 school friends. Cake, presents, laughter. No one from Renee's family reached out. Owen sent a brief email in February. Formal, stilted. Paige and I are moving to Seattle for her job. I thought you should know. I still think you're wrong about everything, but I guess that's your choice. I hope Mavis is okay. Renee didn't respond. In March, she heard through a mutual acquaintance that her mother had started telling people Renee wouldn't let her see her granddaughter, that Renee was unstable, that she'd always been difficult. Renee didn't defend herself, didn't explain, let people believe what they wanted. The ones who mattered, the friends who'd seen how Mavis had changed after that night, how she'd started to relax again, they knew the truth. The ones who didn't matter didn't need to know anything. One evening in late April, Mavis was drawing at the kitchen table. Spring rain pattered against the windows. The house smelled like the soup Renee had made for dinner, chicken and vegetables, Mavis's favorite. Mom. Mavis didn't look up from her drawing. Yeah, baby. Am I still related to Grandma and Uncle Owen? Renee set down the dish she was washing. Biologically, yes, but not. Mavis frowned, searching for the word. Not really. What do you mean? Like, are we still family with them? Renee dried her hands and came to sit beside her daughter. She looked at the drawing, a house with apple trees and a smiling sun. What do you think family means? She asked. Mavis considered this seriously. People who love you. That's part of it. What else? People who keep you safe, who want you to be happy. Exactly. Renee touched her daughter's hand. Family are people who protect you, who show up when you need them, who don't hurt you on purpose. So Grandma and Uncle Owen, Mavis trailed off, aren't family. Not anymore. Mavis nodded slowly. Then she went back to her drawing, adding a bird to one of the apple trees. That's okay, she said after a moment. I like it being just us. Me too, sweetheart. And maybe Ruby could come over more. She's nice. Ruby is very nice. We can invite her for dinner next week if you want. Okay. Mavis smiled, that small, careful smile that was becoming more frequent, more open. Can I have hot chocolate? After you finish your homework. I already did. Then yes, you can have hot chocolate. Mavis jumped up and ran to get her favorite mug, the one with stars on it. Renee watched her, this small person who'd been through something no child should experience, and who was somehow impossibly okay. Not because of family, because family had failed her. She was okay because Renee had made a choice, had drawn a line, had protected her above all else, even at the cost of everyone who shared their blood. Some people would say it was cruel, unforgiving, too harsh. Renee didn't care what those people said. She'd made a promise the night she found Mavis in that garage. A promise that her daughter would always be safe, always be chosen first, always know that her mother wouldn't tolerate anyone who threatened her well-being, even if they were family, especially if they were family. Mavis came back with her mug full of cocoa, topped with more marshmallows than Renee usually allowed. Renee let it go, let her daughter sit at the table and drink chocolate and draw pictures of houses with apple trees while rain fell outside and the kitchen stayed warm and bright. This was family now. This small, careful space they'd built together. This safe place where no one got locked in garages or left alone or used to prove a point. This was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, Renee found an envelope in her mailbox. No stamp. No return address, just her name written in familiar handwriting. Inside was a card. I'm sorry for what happened. I was wrong. I miss you both. Can we please talk? Mom. Renee stood at the mailbox, holding the card. The wind blew cherry blossoms across the yard. A neighbor waved from across the street. Normal Saturday, sounds filled the air. Lawnmowers, children playing, dogs barking. She looked at the card for a long moment. Then she tore it in half, and half again, and again, until it was confetti in her hands. She let the pieces fall into the recycling bin and went back inside, where Mavis was watching cartoons and didn't ask who the mail was from. Some doors, once closed, stayed closed. Not out of cruelty, not out of spite, out of love. The clearest, most uncompromising love Renee had ever known. That night, after Mavis was asleep, Renee sat at the window and looked out at the quiet street, at the house with the apple trees, at the life they'd built in the aftermath of that terrible night. She thought about her daughter sleeping peacefully down the hall. No nightmares, no fear, just the steady breathing of a child who felt safe. She thought about the people she'd cut from their lives, the phone calls that no longer came, the holidays they'd spend alone, the explanations she'd stopped giving, and she felt no regret, no doubt, no wavering. She'd chosen her daughter. Every time, every way. She would do it again without hesitation, because that's what family was supposed to do. Not the family you were born into, the family you chose, the family you protected, the family you kept safe above all else, even when it meant standing alone. Renee closed the curtain and turned off the light. In the morning, she'd make pancakes. She'd help Mavis with her reading homework. She'd water the garden and return library books and live the quiet, careful life they'd built. A life without her mother's criticism, without Owen's judgment, without Paige's dismissal. A life where her daughter knew, without question, that she came first. Always. Forever. No exceptions.